On the 3rd anniversary of our marriage, my husband said he had a surprise for me. He arranged a cruise. After he took me out on deck, he suddenly pushed me overboard. He thought he would inherit a large sum of money, but he didn't know. I was actually a sea witch. My specialty is manipulating memories. My dear wife, put on a nice dress. Let's go out on deck and take some pictures. It's our 3rd wedding anniversary. My husband Alexander arranged this cruise trip. Okay, let's go. My husband. I happily took his hand and walked together to the deck. I saw that many people were taking photos and checking in. Honey, there are too many people here. Let's go over there. Alexander took me to the very edge of the deck. There was no one here and avoided the surveillance cameras. He said, "Honey, pose like that." I opened my arms facing the sea. Alexander stood behind me, gently guiding me into position. My back was to him. My arms spread wide. I felt the salty sea breeze. It smelled like home. He raised the camera, ready to capture this back shot of me. Suddenly, a strong push came from behind. I lost my balance and fell over the railing. Splash, I fell into the sea. I looked up. Alexander on the boat was grinning from ear to ear. Then he started shouting, "Help! Someone help! My wife has fallen in the water." I couldn't help laughing at his performance. Isn't this the usual routine in the human world when a wife is killed? But Alexander, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed, because I'm the siren who can control memories. Alexander shouted for help. Soon a crowd gathered. He shouted anxiously, "Help! My wife has fallen overboard. Can someone please help her, please?" Alexander was crying and his face was covered in tears. The onlookers were moved. Someone came up to him and took hold of him. They were afraid that he might jump after him in a moment of impulse. At that moment, someone asked, "What's going on? I'm in charge. What's happened?" The cruise ship management quickly arrived after hearing the news. Alexander hurried up to him and grabbed him. He said urgently, "Hurry! Send someone down there to save my wife. She fell into the water when she was taking photos. Please save her as soon as possible." The people around them also started to discuss it. Someone asked, "Does your wife know how to swim? Call the lifeboat to save her. She just fell in." Hearing this, Alexander froze. He knew I could swim. The person in charge hurriedly said, Okay, I'll send someone right away, but the family shouldn't get their hopes up, because the fall from here is right in the propeller's path." So, Alexander was slightly reassured by the manager's words. Soon, the search and rescue team launched their rescue operation. "Manager, we've searched the surrounding waters, but we haven't found anyone. And there's no body." "Manager, we've found nothing either." "Manager, the surveillance camera has picked up something unusual. Would you like to come and have a look first?" Deck. Everyone is anxiously waiting for the search and rescue results. News keeps coming over the intercom, but the search and rescue efforts are still making no progress. What about the surveillance camera? What's going on? "I'm coming." The manager hears the news from the surveillance room. He immediately leaves the deck. Hearing the news, Alexander immediately looks around. He is relieved to see that there are no cameras. However, not long after the manager left, the rescue team on the sea had all withdrawn. What's going on? The person has not been found yet. Why did the rescue team withdraw? What happened? Why don't they continue to look for it? Has the person been found? The people on the deck started to discuss in a flurry. Alexander was also stunned when he saw this scene. He asked, "Where is the manager? Where is the person in charge? Why don't you continue to look for it? My wife must still be alive. Don't go, you guys." Alexander quickly reacted. He fell to his knees and implored the ship's crew to continue the search for his wife, who had fallen overboard. Before long, the manager appeared. "Mr. Alexander, please don't get upset. We need to clarify something with you first. Are you sure your wife really fell into the sea? I saw her fall myself. There's no way that's a lie. If you're not going to look for her, what's the point of talking about it here?" The manager's unusual composure caused anger among the people gathered on the deck. Someone said, "That's right. A big person fell in. How could it be fake? Is there something wrong with this manager? He missed the best opportunity to rescue. Your cruise ship is fully responsible. Hurry up and save her. Her husband is so anxious. And you are still asking." Original text. "Mr. Alexander, here is the situation. You said your wife fell overboard here, but our surveillance cameras show that you came across the deck here alone with a camera. And the surveillance cameras show that you were the only person here today. There is no wife as you claim. Mr. Alexander, you said your wife fell overboard here, but our surveillance cameras show that you came across the deck here alone with a camera. And The surveillance cameras also show that you were the only person here today and did not see your wife. Alexander could not help laughing at the cruise manager's words. He said, "Stop talking nonsense here. Hurry up and go save the person. Don't waste any more time." Alexander walked straight up to the manager and pushed him, urging him to hurry and save the person, completely ignoring what the manager had just said. The manager hurriedly said, "Mr. Alexander, don't be impatient. I haven't finished yet." The manager reached out to stop Alexander and continued, "We have checked the surveillance footage. We have also retrieved your ticket purchase record. The record shows that you bought a single ticket. In addition, we have also watched the surveillance footage of you boarding the ship. You were also alone when you boarded the ship. We have checked. No one boarded the ship with you. Therefore, we suspect that the story you told about your wife falling into the sea may not be true." After the manager finished speaking, people around him started to discuss the matter. What's going on? Is there something wrong with this person? Was he planning to pretend his wife had fallen overboard and then cheat the cruise company out of money? He couldn't even be bothered to pay for 2 tickets, so he had arranged the whole thing himself. What a waste of our feelings. "Brother, if they don't give you the Oscar for Best Actor this year, I won't accept it." At that moment, the cruise manager confidently pulled out his phone. "To convince you I'm not lying, I've saved the surveillance footage to my phone. If you don't believe me, you can watch it." Alexander quickly snatched the phone. Then he looked incredulous. On the surveillance footage, it was indeed just him. He was alone, pulling his suitcase onto the ship. He walked alone to the deck. And alone, he came to this place with his camera. "This is impossible. This must be fake. I see. You're afraid I'll sue you, so you made a fake video on purpose. I'll tell you. I've already called the police. As soon as the ship docks, the police will come. You won't get away with it. What's the point of making a fake video? I'll sue you for attempted murder." Alexander pointed angrily at the cruise manager. The other party just smiled and nodded. He said, "Go ahead." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Brother, you said his video was fake. If you check the booking record on your phone, you'll know the truth." Alexander heard this suggestion. He suddenly felt that it made sense. Alexander quickly took out his phone to check the booking history. When he found it, he froze. He didn't say a word for a long time. The helpful man next to him came over to see what was going on. "Brother, didn't you buy a single ticket? Where did you get a wife from? Just ignore him. This person must be mentally ill." The people around him immediately cast strange glances. Someone whispered, "What's wrong with this person? How did he manage to get on the ship? What a waste of time to have to put up with his theatrics. It's really annoying. He's got a persecution complex. Manager, you need to keep a closer eye on him." There was a flurry of discussion on deck. Then Alexander suddenly laughed. He said, "I understand now. You must have done something behind my back, changed the order. It doesn't matter. When the ship docks, the police will be here, and the truth will come out. You're all guilty of attempted murder. Just wait until you go to jail." Unfortunately, no one paid any attention to Alexander's words. Everyone gave him a strange look. Then they patted the manager on the back, telling him to keep an eye on Alexander. Not long after the ship had set sail, it quickly turned around and returned. Alexander had called the police in advance. The police were already waiting at the port. The police asked, "Who called the police to report someone falling into the sea?" As soon as Alexander saw the police, he immediately ran over and anxiously said, "Officer, I reported the case. My wife accidentally fell into the sea." The cruise ship manager also walked up behind him. "Did you find the person?" the police asked. Alexander's eyes immediately reddened. "Officer, I also want to complain about the staff of the cruise ship. They saw a dead person and did not help. They did not let anyone save my wife. This is nothing more than intentional homicide. They even fabricated fake videos to deceive everyone. Officer, we were really wronged. He boarded the ship alone, but insisted that his wife had fallen overboard." The cruise manager followed, explaining. The police raised their hands to stop them. All right. We can talk about this at the police station." Once they arrived at the police station, everyone started taking statements. The police officer first got the general situation. "Your name is Alexander, right? Can you tell me your wife's name?" "My wife's name is Isabella. She's 26 years old. Today is our 3rd wedding anniversary. I specially arranged this cruise trip." Alexander suddenly burst into tears and could not speak. The 2 police officers on the other side looked at each other. One of them asked, "Have you and your wife obtained a marriage certificate?" "Of course. We are a legal couple, Mr. Alexander. Our system shows that you are unmarried. As soon as the police officer finished speaking, Alexander immediately stood up. He looked refreshed. It was completely different from his previous listless appearance. This is impossible. Take a closer look. Don't make a mistake. Don't worry. Sit down and talk slowly. Our system shows that you are indeed unmarried, and my colleague just checked the surveillance video from the cruise ship. No changes were found. So according to the records, you did go on the cruise alone, and there is no Isabella on the cruise ship's passenger list. Alexander listened to the officer's words. It felt like listening to something from another world. He couldn't believe it. He asked doubtfully, "What are you talking about? I don't understand. How could my wife be missing? We've been married for 3 years. I bought the tickets. I took her on the cruise ship. How could she be missing? Mr. Alexander, can you tell us your wife's details so we can check again in the system? Her name is Isabella. She's 26 years old. She's quite wealthy. The house I'm living in now is hers. She also has a villa over there in Longxiang Garden." The officer couldn't help but interrupt Alexander. "Do you know where your wife works?" "I don't know. She never told me." "Listen to what I'm saying." The officer on the other side shook his head helplessly. "We've been married for 3 years. I still don't know where my wife works. However, I know all about her real estate. Sorry, Mr. Alexander. We have checked all the Isabellas, but we have not found the one you mentioned. Our technicians have checked your phone. They found that there is no Isabella in your contacts. Therefore, the wife you mentioned does not exist, so we cannot accept your report." "What? No. You stay right there. Don't go. The people who were together in the morning, how could someone just suddenly disappear? Did you take a bribe from the ship's manager? Are you just going to let this go?" Alexander was so angry that he pushed forward and grabbed the police officer, who was about to leave with the computer. He suspected that the police officer had taken money and was just saying that on purpose. The police officer said to him, "Mr. Alexander, you need to be responsible for what you say. There is no such person in our system as you claim. Don't just accuse us like that. I advise you to go to the hospital and get checked up." Alexander's words made the police officer in front of him very unhappy. After the 2 police officers left, people came and went in the police station, but no one paid any attention to Alexander. Well, rich people really can't be trusted. Just like my late wife. She was obviously so rich, but she insisted that I work hard. A friend asked me for a loan. She wouldn't even give me 1 million. But now it's fine. All her money is mine. We Sirens never age or die, so I really am very rich. Alexander knows this. It's just a small part of my fortune, but I really didn't expect it. He wanted to harm me over just 1 million. Alexander is a man of bad character. I knew that long ago. He just looks good. When I met him, he had just graduated from graduate school and found a job. He once told me, "Isabella, don't worry. I will work hard after we get married. I will take good care of you." He saw me get out of the luxury car but pretended not to know anything. He was obviously attracted to my wealth, but pretended to love me for me. It was really funny. However, because of his face, I agreed to marry him. A marriage certificate is just a piece of paper to me. I have married thousands of men in my life. There must be at least hundreds. He moved into my house after we got married. I still remember him looking at me in amazement and saying, "Wife, I didn't know you were so rich. Looks like I've married a rich woman. Honey, you have to believe me. Whether you're rich or not, I'll always love you the most." Seeing his confident expression, I almost burst out laughing. After we got married, I didn't give him much money. He said he would work hard to support me. I couldn't let him go back on his word and become a burden on me. But in other ways, I have not treated him badly. He eats, wears, and uses, including the car he drives, which is not paid for with my money in terms of supporting a man. I have always been quite generous. After all, he does look good, but the other day, he came to me with his colleague. He said his friend had been cheated at gambling. He lost more than $1 million. They couldn't pay it back. Their house was about to be repossessed, so they came to me for help. I asked, "Were you cheated?" "That's easy. I'll help you get justice. You don't have to pay them a single penny. Where did you lose the money? What was the name of the person?" Unexpectedly, after hearing my words, his colleague hesitated a little. Alexander even said nervously, "There's no need to go to all that trouble. They both have powerful backers. Let's not mess with them, just pay the money and forget about it." Seeing Alexander's embarrassed smile, I realized that they were lying to me. I refused Alexander's request on the spot. He was not convinced. He appealed to my emotions. He reasoned with me. He persuaded me for a long time. In the end, I still did not agree. After they left, I deliberately hired a detective to find out the truth. It turned out that the one who owed the money was Alexander. He had gone behind my back and found someone else, and drove my luxury car with that person out for a joyride. As a result, he hit someone. Alexander was driving drunk and hit someone. Originally, the matter could have been settled with compensation, but he listened to the persuasion of others. He even chose to run the person over. He wanted to end it all. After the victim's family learned the truth, they refused to mediate. They insisted on prosecuting Alexander for intentional homicide. They demanded that he go to prison. In the end, Alexander reached an agreement with the family to compensate for the accident and settle the matter. But Alexander didn't have $3 million. He didn't dare to ask me for it. He was afraid that I would find out about his affair. He quietly asked someone to take out a mortgage on my car. Since he wasn't the owner, he only got $1 million. He then embezzled another $1 million from his company. He also borrowed some high-interest loans. Only then did he barely manage to get the $3 million together. This is how he avoided going to prison. According to the detective's investigation, the so-called victim is actually still alive. The whole thing was a scam planned by Zaya Asen and them together. The goal was to defraud Alexander of his money. Alexander was not sure whether he had really killed someone, but his embezzlement was soon discovered. The person who discovered it was a colleague who had come to the house to borrow money before. He and Alexander were classmates. After learning that Alexander had embezzled money, he did not report it. Instead, he told Alexander to make up the money as soon as possible. So he staged a scene of borrowing money at home, but I didn't lend it to him. He complained, "Why, she has money but won't lend it to me. There are tens of millions of jewels and gold in the safe by her bed. She drives a luxury car, lives in a villa, but she won't even lend me $1 million. The richer someone is, the more unscrupulous they are. She is my wife, according to the law. Half of her assets belong to me. Why won't she lend me $1 million, brother? Why don't you just tell your sister-in-law the truth? Can she really just watch you go to jail? No. If she finds out about Sophia and me, she'll make sure I don't get a penny and leave. Brother Alexander, seriously, I can't keep this a secret forever. You need to deal with it quickly." The surveillance video shows Alexander seeing his colleague off to the door, where they discuss borrowing money from me. Alexander doesn't notice that there's a camera outside the door. Otherwise, he would have accused me of being suspicious again. The security camera was installed by the previous owner. I never thought I would need it. In the video, Alexander angrily accuses me of being heartless, but he never considered that he was the one who had been eyeing my property from the start. Wasn't he even more heartless? I watched the video again. After Alexander had seen his colleague off, he stood in the doorway for a long time. He came back with a smile on his face. But I didn't realize at the time that he was already planning to do something to me. He probably thought, if I can get rid of her, I can inherit her wealth. Unfortunately, he underestimated me. I'm not that easy to deal with. At the police station, Alexander sat there for a long time, but no one paid any attention to him. He couldn't wait any longer. He asked, "Officer, can you issue a death certificate for my wife?" He was waiting for a death certificate for me so that he could legally inherit my wealth. But there was no such person. "How could I issue a death certificate for you? You'd better go to the hospital quickly." The police station staff rolled their eyes helplessly and said to the other person, "You." Seeing that no one at the police station would pay any attention to him anymore, Alexander took a taxi straight home. Although both the cruise manager and the police station said that there was no Isabella. So what? It doesn't matter if the person isn't there, as long as the money is still there. Even if he can't get the money in the house and the bank card right now, the cash and jewelry in the safe at home would be enough for Alexander to live comfortably for the rest of his life. Thinking about this, Alexander couldn't help but quicken his pace home. But as soon as the elevator door opened, he was stunned by the chaotic scene before him. My clothes, blankets, and luggage had been thrown into the doorway. There were still people in the house throwing things out. I yelled, "Stop. What are you doing? Who allowed you to enter my home? Don't touch my things." Alexander quickly stepped forward to stop the person who was throwing things out. The other person looked at him and said, "Hey, you're back. I don't have to find someone to throw it away. I'll just take your stuff. Hurry up and go." A man in his 50s or 60s sitting on the sofa in the living room asked, "Who are you? Who let you into my home? Who gave you permission to move my things?" Alexander angrily walked up to argue. The man laughed when he heard this. "Your home, you rented this house for 3 years and now it's your home. Let me remind you, you still owe me 4 months' rent. Before you leave, remember to pay the rent. You said you didn't have the money to pay the rent. You asked me to give you a few more months. But then you went on a cruise. Is that appropriate? What are you talking about? My wife bought this house. How can it be yours? I suggest you leave immediately. Otherwise, I'll call the police. You're talking nonsense. You've been living here for 3 years. I've never heard you mention a wife. If it wasn't for the fact that you were a university student, I wouldn't have rented to you. Seeing that the other person was not responding, Alexander grabbed his arm directly. He dragged him up and pushed him towards the door. The other person shouted, Hey, how can you do that? Let's be reasonable. At the beginning, I saw that he was a university student. He had no money, so I rented to him. It's been 3 years. I haven't raised the rent once, and now he says the house is his own. The man stood in the doorway shouting, Everyone come and have a look. When the neighbors heard this, they all gathered around. What's wrong with this young man? He's still a university student. Why is he bullying people? Oh dear, I've never seen him act like this before. You really can't tell what's going on inside someone's mind. I saw a video online today. It said he might have mental problems. Yes, I saw that video too. The guy insisted that his wife had fallen into the sea, but when they checked, they found out that he didn't even have a wife. Something's wrong with him. You should stay away from him. Everyone's suddenly avoiding him like the plague. Yesterday, we were all laughing and joking with our neighbors. But now, they're looking at him with disgust. What are you talking about? My wife and I have been married for 3 years. We've always lived here. My wife bought the house. Isabella, don't you remember? How could this be this man's house? Jessica, when you were busy at work, didn't you often send the kids to my house? My wife helped you look after them and let them go home after dinner. Do you remember all this? Alexander took the older sister of the neighbor across the street by the arm, looking at her expectantly. Unexpectedly, Jessica rolled her eyes. Alexander, if you don't like my kids eating at your house, just say so. I won't let him go anymore. And you made up a wife. We've been neighbors for years. When have you ever seen you have a wife, Alexander? You've lived here for years. We've never heard you mention a wife. Margaret from upstairs chimed in. How much food can a child eat at your house? Don't make up such excuses to scare people. But these words made Alexander feel very scared. How could I not have a wife? She is Isabella. You all know her. She is rich. Yes. Where is the money? Where is the safe? Alexander didn't want to think about whether Isabella really existed at the moment. He was only concerned about whether the money was still there. He suddenly turned around and rushed into the room. He quickly opened the bedroom door, but he found it empty. There was nothing there. He anxiously looked around. Where was the safe? Where were the jewels? Why isn't there any? Why? The place where the safe used to be is now empty. Isabella's jewelry table has become a desk. Where is the money? Where has the money gone? Why? Alexander rushes into the room like a madman. He knocks everything on the floor. His eyes are red. His crazed appearance frightens the onlookers even more. Someone whispers, "There's definitely something wrong with this guy." Another person agreed. "It's really scary. How could I have missed it before? I even sent my child to his house." Thinking back on it now is really worrying. "John, we really can't rent this house to him anymore. You should tell him to move out." The people outside were talking excitedly. After Alexander had let off steam, he sat on the floor and didn't move. I looked around and noticed that the room had completely changed. The place where the wedding photo used to hang was now empty. There were no female belongings in the room either. All traces of Isabella's life had been removed. It was as if the room had only ever been occupied by one person. Why was it like this? Isabella and I had clearly lived together for 3 years. Why did everyone say that this person had never existed, just now on the boat? He clearly pushed Isabella into the sea, but why did the surveillance camera only show him alone? From the moment he pushed Isabella off the boat, it seems like Isabella disappeared from this world. What the hell is going on? Why is this happening? Alexander couldn't help but recall the bits and pieces of his life with Isabella, hoping to find some clues from it. They didn't even have a wedding when they got married. Alexander had been an orphan since he was young. Isabella also said that her parents were always abroad. They didn't even come back for the wedding, apart from these neighbors. He really couldn't think of anyone else who knew his wife. Then it suddenly occurred to him. Yes, Benjamin was at my house 2 days ago. He met my wife. He definitely remembers. Alexander felt like he had found a lifeline. He immediately stood up and rushed out of the room. At the same time, he took out his phone and asked where Benjamin was. Benjamin answered, "I'm at the office." "Dude, why didn't you come to work today? You didn't answer your phone." Lao Ma is really worried. Hurry up and come over. Go to work. I already took some time off work, didn't I? Oops. I'm not sure about that. Just come here as soon as you can. And with that, Alexander hangs up the phone. He looks confused. He took 3 days off work in advance to take his wife on a trip. His boss, Lao Ma, knows that Alexander comes from a good family. He is usually quite friendly with him, so he readily agreed to the request. But now his boss is turning against him. But that's not the most important thing right now. As soon as Alexander arrived at the office, he went straight to Benjamin's desk. It so happened that he was returning with a glass of water. Alexander asked directly, "Benjamin, I want to ask you something. Do you remember when you went to my wife to borrow money?" Unexpectedly, as soon as these words were uttered, Benjamin's expression immediately became a little awkward. He quickly said, "No, brother, there are so many people in the company. Why do you mention this? You remember, right? Isabella is my wife." Alexander's heart suddenly hung in the balance, but Benjamin's next words sent him into a tailspin. Where did you get a wife? When did you get married? How come you didn't even tell your brother? Isabella, didn't you go to her the other day to borrow $1 million? She didn't lend it to you. You forgot. Alexander grabbed Benjamin's arm tightly. He looked very anxious. Their conversation quickly attracted the attention of the rest of the company. Everyone gathered around. Someone asked Alexander, "What are you talking about? Didn't you come to me the other day to borrow money?" Benjamin listened to Alexander's words with a blank expression. "Benjamin, don't you remember you gambled and lost? You sold the house. You even borrowed $1 million from my wife. It was just the other day you came to my house specifically. Alexander, you were sleeping at home. You must have confused your brain. We didn't make this up, did we? But since you brought it up first, I won't hide it for you. You came to see me a couple of days ago. You said that your embezzlement had been discovered. You asked me to lend you $1 million for emergencies. I gave you all the $500,000 I had saved for a long time. You're accusing me when you've just woken up. How can you do this to me? You're talking nonsense. My wife is so rich. How could I possibly embezzle company funds? You're talking nonsense. Where did you get a wife from? Stop talking nonsense." The two of them started to fight. A colleague immediately called the security guard. Not long after, the company's senior management launched an investigation into the embezzlement incident mentioned by Benjamin. The investigation results showed that, during the 3 years Alexander had been in office, he had embezzled a total of $1.08 million public funds from the company. The company quickly fired him and took him to court. At the same time, Alexander was taken back to the police station for fighting. The police officer said, "This person really has a problem. I was kind enough to lend him money, but he hit me instead. He kept saying his wife was rich, but he doesn't even have a wife." Benjamin covers his face. He tells the police about his grievances. At this, Alexander opposite him suddenly becomes agitated. He shouts, "Stop it. I have a wife. She was very rich. Now she's dead. Her money all belongs to me. It's all mine." The police quickly push Alexander back into his seat, but he kept on talking. Benjamin asked cautiously, "Is he a bit crazy? You work with him, don't you?" Alexander reported to the police this morning that his wife had fallen overboard on the cruise ship. "But we found out that he is not even married. Is there any woman he is close to?" "No, he has always been single. But when he came in today, he said he had a very rich wife. Her name is Isabella. We have also checked. There is no woman matching that description. Alexander's parents are both dead. He has no relatives nearby. We have contacted the psychiatric hospital. He will be examined later." Oops, why has he suddenly become mentally ill? Benjamin looked at Alexander, who kept talking to himself. He felt quite uncomfortable. After all, they had been colleagues for several years. He had never expected him to suddenly go insane. It didn't take long. The psychiatric hospital's car came to pick up Alexander. After the doctor had examined him, he said, "He probably has schizophrenia." After entering the psychiatric hospital, Alexander still talked to himself every day. He said his wife was Isabella. He also said his wife was very rich. "Alexander, it's time to take your medicine." He got up from bed as usual to take his medicine. But when he stood up, he suddenly froze. "Isabella, is that you? Is that really you?" Alexander cried as he hugged me tightly. He said, "Everyone said you were fake. I've finally found you, in the face of everyone's denials." He finally confirmed Isabella's existence. I whispered to him, "Honey, take your medicine first." I gently handed him the phone and the pills. He smiled and was about to take them. But suddenly he froze. "No, you're dead. My love, Why would you think that? I'm fine. Nothing could have happened to me. I smiled at him, but he became more and more frightened. No way. You're dead. I pushed you off the cliff myself. I saw you fall into the sea with my own eyes. How could you still be alive? You're a ghost. You must be a ghost. You did all this. Right? You're here to take revenge on me. You're here to take revenge on me. Alexander pushed me away violently. He yelled. He even knocked the medicine out of my hand. What's wrong, Miss Isabella? Are you okay? The doctor at the psychiatric hospital heard a noise in the room. He hurried in to check. He saw Alexander having a fit. The doctor immediately shouted for someone to tie him to the bed and said, "The patient is very agitated. Prepare a sedative." A group of people held Alexander down on the bed. They gave him a sedative. The nurse helped me. She asked with concern, "Miss Isabella, are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's just that seeing him like this, I feel quite bad. Alas, it's all my fault." I shook my head, looking both sad and self-blaming. "Miss Isabella, don't say that. That year, your husband accidentally fell off a boat. If you hadn't reacted quickly and grabbed him, he probably would have died. Who would have thought that a big man like him would have been so frightened? How could he have become like this?" The nurse gently comforted me. When Alexander heard these words, he widened his eyes in surprise. "Forget it. I'd better go out." The nurse said, "Turn to open the door and leave." I looked at Alexander and smiled coldly. Then she turned and left. As I closed the door, I heard the doctor talking about me. "This Miss Isabella is really something. Her husband has a mental illness, and she's still by his side. Yes, I really don't know where he got the luck to marry such a good wife." From the crack in the door, I saw Alexander's eyes full of resentment. They were slowly closing. "My husband's condition has worsened again. We may have to increase the amount of medication he takes every day." Yes, his condition is indeed getting worse. The dosage of medication has to be increased accordingly. But it's been more than a year. Only you, Miss Isabella, still visit him regularly in our place. We rarely see family members visiting, but there's nothing I can do. He is my husband. I have to be responsible for him until the end. Miss Isabella, it's really rare to find a rich man like you who is so caring and loyal. I smiled, without saying anything else. Every time the peak season for cruise trips arrives, the marketing department dredges up this news. Alexander fell overboard during a cruise. In a moment of crisis, his wife quickly grabbed his hand. They were eventually rescued. Alexander survived. Someone mentioned, "I saw this news. I heard that her husband seems to have been traumatized by the incident. He has some kind of mental problem, but his wife never left his side. She has been taking care of him ever since." Another person responded, "Really, you can be scared to death over something like that? How scared are you, really? It happened on our boat. The old man was rescued and fainted. When he woke up, he kept saying that his wife was dead. He was later admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I saw the video someone posted. When the man woke up, he kept saying that his wife had fallen into the sea. I read some bloggers' analysis. They said the man originally wanted to harm his wife, but he accidentally fell into the sea instead. So he always felt in his heart that his wife was already dead. The person upstairs is right. I've also seen that surveillance video. The man clearly deliberately led his wife to a dead angle of the camera. It must have been premeditated. His wife has never left his side over the years. I heard that she often visited him in the psychiatric hospital. I heard that his wife is quite wealthy. Really, rich lady, are you still looking for a boyfriend? When I'm hungry, I know to eat. When it rains, I know to use an umbrella. Rich lady, can you be more flexible with your gender? Dear lady, that kind of irresponsible person is not worth your attention. Why not take a look at me? The abilities of our sirens are actually limited. The only thing we can do is to modify memories. So when I turned around, I changed Alexander's memory. In his memory, he did push me off the boat, but as a result, he ended up in a world without me. Everyone had forgotten about me, only he still remembered. In the end, he got nothing. Instead, he was treated like a lunatic. In fact, when he pushed, I quickly ducked. He went straight over the railing due to inertia. I reached out in time to catch him. It would have been so boring for him to just die. You'll just spend the rest of your life in a mental hospital, my dear husband.